Good morning. I'm Shannon White, the chapter executive with the Greater Kentucky and Southern Indiana chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. We are so thrilled to have you here this morning and so grateful to continue our partnership with Trilogy Health Services and to have David Troxel and Barbara Statz here today with us. The past 2 years have been so challenging for our families, and we're so sad we can't be together today. But the health and safety of our families and those that we serve is our highest priority. So first, I want to introduce David Troxel. He lives in Sacramento, but he started his career here in Kentucky at the University of Kentucky Sanders Brown Center on Aging. He's become a nationally and internationally recognized speaker for his writing and teaching in the fields of Alzheimer's disease and long-term care. He's co-authored with Virginia Bell 6 influential books, including his new book, The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care, which he's going to talk about today. His areas of expertise include best care practices for persons with dementia, caregiver support, staff training, and long-term care program development. David has also been a family caregiver supporting his mother, Dorothy, who passed away with Alzheimer's disease in April 2008. You can read more about David's work at his website, bestfriendsapproach.com, or on Facebook at facebook.com/bestfriendsapproach. We're also so excited today to have Barbara Statz. She is our longtime community educator with our chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and she brings her passion for our mission to everything that she does. She always wants to ensure that those living with Alzheimer's are treated with dignity and respect. I'm going to be the moderator over here across the room, socially distanced, so as you have questions, please enter them into the chat bar, and we'll be sure to read them aloud when David and Barbara's programs are over. So thank you so much again for being here today, and now I'd like to welcome David Troxel. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Shannon. It's great to be here back in Kentucky, and as Shannon mentioned, I began my career at the University of Kentucky when it was just one of 10 federally funded Alzheimer's disease research centers, and I know our audience is larger than Kentucky today, but I'm very proud to say, Shannon, that I think I've been in every county in Kentucky, all 8,000 of them, or however many counties there are in the state of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You know, it's very encouraging to be here as the new year begins. Of course, we're still so stressed by the pandemic that has been so damaging to our elders and to our society. But I think there's a lot of good news ahead this next year. Hopefully, we will see the end of the pandemic. And thanks to my friends at the Alzheimer's Association, I'm also so delighted there's record levels of research funding. I think it's going to be really a tremendous year when it comes to the field of Alzheimer's disease research, treatment, and care. So I'm delighted to be here today to jump into our topic about dementia-related behavior. I think we've already had many questions come in, so it'll be a very robust discussion. And maybe, Shannon, next year we'll be here in person, so I'm hoping that will certainly be the case. I think you've done more than a good enough job on my introductions, but I am delighted to be here, and I'll just make a shout out to my dear friend and writing partner, Virginia Bell, who lives in Lexington, Kentucky. We began working together in the 1980s and published a number of books in the field. I want you to also know that I've been a family member for my mother, Dorothy, and I'm delighted to also be here for Trilogy today as their educational consultant when it comes to dementia care, and thank them for also in their memory care neighborhoods adopting the Best Friends approach with something they very innovatively called the Bff Program, for symbolizing best friends forever. So let's get into it, and we'll talk a bit about memory care today and where we are. I thought I'd first tell you a bit more about this model of care called the Best Friends approach. I'm sure some of you have heard of this, some of you have not. But this began out of my work in the 1980s with Virginia, when we began traveling around Kentucky, talking to probably thousands of people with dementia and their caregivers. Virginia helped start one of the first adult day centers in the country, a program called Best Friends, a day center still going strong in Lexington. And of course, back in the 1980s, we had very few medical tools. We didn't really have much knowledge about dementia. And so in starting this adult day program, there were people who said to my colleague Virginia, you know, be careful, people with dementia can be aggressive, they can be violent. In kind of a humorous way, one expert actually encouraged us to have our volunteers take self-defense lessons. I'm proud to say that in the history of the Adult Day Center, the only bloodshed, I think, is when a volunteer's poodle bit another volunteer, so there were no other incidents of bloodshed. But we started the program not really quite understanding how to help people living with cognitive loss. And so Virginia and the volunteers basically put together a program rich in activity, engagement. We learn their life stories. We basically tried to have kind of a party atmosphere, a social atmosphere, and we soon discovered that this was deeply therapeutic. We kind of accidentally created something called a therapeutic environment. If you Google that term, a therapeutic environment is an environment that's healing. And by doing this for people with dementia, I think we learned that there's a lot we can do to lift them up. There is a person beneath this cloak of dementia that we want to reach every day. So again, this model of care basically says that without an effective medicine, and sadly, we still don't really have a medical answer for Alzheimer's disease. I'll talk in a minute about pain and depression and treating things you can. I think the treatment for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias is really caregiver education, staff education. It's all about relationship-centered care, and in my philosophy, what a person needs is a best friend. And let me tell you a bit more about that. Basically, when we think about friendship, we all have friends, and friends, we have empathy for each other. We communicate, we have fun together, we do things together. And I think we also really have this great connection to kind of make it a mutually beneficial friendship. We help them, sometimes they help us. Maybe I pick up somebody when they're late for work and their car is broken down. Maybe he'll help me in some way too. And so when we think about friendship, again, it can be healing, it can be therapeutic, it can be positive. And you see the person living with dementia, they have frustration, anxiety, fear. They don't always know where they are. I think it can be a very tough and lonely experience. So when we as a care partner or caregiver kind of reach out to them and demonstrate affection and know about them and offer reassuring, kind words, I think it helps us overcome a lot of the challenges for dementia. And so this approach about socialization, activity, and learning some of the do's and don'ts about care are some of the things we'll talk about today with Barbara's support as well. So again, I want to shout out to my friends at Trilogy for their innovation, for their kindness. When I just got off a phone call with about 25 of their leaders, and I love the warmth and empathy that comes with quality care. So thank you again, Trilogy, for sponsoring the program today. So as I think about the topic of behavior in dementia, I wanted to start with my third bullet on this slide here and say that it's a myth that all persons with dementia are aggressive. In fact, my own mother, Dorothy, was what I would call pleasantly confused. She was very kind and really did not have some of this aggressive behavior. But just like any of us can get impatient or frustrated, imagine you're stuck in traffic and you're late for an appointment, or you're in line to order at a restaurant and it's just going very slow. I think all of us, we're only human. We have these moments of frustration, anger, and angst. So do people living with cognitive loss. So I think one is we want to understand that behavior sometimes is normal. I know for myself, one time, years and years ago, before international cell phones, I got lost in Tokyo, Japan. And I was actually there for a meeting. And I was trying to talk to people. They didn't speak English. I was trying to use money, and I didn't really know how it worked. I tried to actually use a payphone to have someone come and help me, pick me up from the hotel, and I couldn't get the telephone to work. And I was having really a lot of angst and fear, and it occurred to me that in so many ways, me being lost in a foreign country, a tourist where I don't speak the language, is almost like the day-to-day life of people living with Alzheimer's disease. So again, as we think about this topic of dementia and behavior, I think that first bullet on the slide here is something I want you to pay attention to, is that when you've met one person with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia, I think you've just met one person with dementia. Everybody is a little bit different. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And so as you think about your mother or father, husband, wife, partner, whoever you're concerned about, if someone says to you, well, everybody with dementia, ... I think the Alzheimer's Association and myself, many other people who really embrace contemporary dementia care realize that we want to individualize care, make this individualized plan. So sophisticated providers understand this, and they advocate for something we could call strengths-based or abilities-based care programming. So one tip I have for many of you, even some of you who might be pretty down right now and frustrated and sad about your situation, as hard as it is, try to think about the positives. Instead of focusing on the 12 or 15 or 20 things mom can no longer do, try to focus on the 2 or 3 or 4 things she still can do, okay? I work with families all the time. David, mother, can't, and then we discover she still loves music. so let's build more on music. We discover she likes to be outdoors on a nice day. We discover she likes to garden, even if she's not very good at it. These are the kinds of things we begin to kind of shift and approach our role as a caregiver. So again, individualized care, recognize that not every behavior is necessarily aggression, but we do certainly want to talk about when things go wrong. Because dementia-related behavior can be triggered by the symptoms of dementia, and it can be very challenging for families and professionals. I'll tell a little Kentucky story on myself. When I first moved here, I moved here from New Jersey and California, and I was at the Sanders Brown Center on Aging, and a caregiver said, you know, David, I'm having a terrible time. I'm having a terrible time. The ox is in the ditch. Now, I'd never heard that phrase before, being from New Jersey and California, and I guess it's an old Kentucky phrase where, you know, when the ox is pulling the plow, and if the ox gets into the ditch, the plow gets into the ditch, and it means basically you're having a terrible day. So the caregiver said, the ox is in the ditch, and I said to her, well, is the ox okay? I thought she really had an ox that had fallen into the ditch. So needless to say, that was you know, a very embarrassing start to my first few days in Kentucky. So again, let's think about some of these difficult behaviors now and how we help, because there are times when you have some issues. What do you do as a caregiver or care partner when the person's angry, agitated, deeply confused, delusional, paranoid, sad, or withdrawn? They're wanting to walk out the front door on a bitter cold night in pajamas. How do we deal with some of these issues? Well, between Barbara and myself, we hope we'll give you some answers. I think, first of all, I always want to do a shout out to the Alzheimer Association. They have an 800 toll-free number. They've got support groups. So if you feel like your ox is in the ditch, that certainly is one place to start. But hopefully we'll give you some ideas today. How do you approach a situation with a person who simply says no to almost everything? They're maybe apathetic. You know, how do we get around some of these issues, and what can we do to prevent aggressive behaviors when they do happen? So again, keep in mind my kind of earlier remarks as we go forward that I do think people with dementia are just like the rest of us in so many ways, and some of these behaviors are triggered by the environment or things that any of us might have if we were in the situation. I think having a calm, steady approach to these behaviors as you go forward also can be very, very helpful. So let's start with what doesn't work. Sometimes when I have a problem, I'll think about what doesn't work. I'm going to take a moment to talk about these psychotropic medications that sometimes physicians prescribe. And I think there's a challenge when it comes to these heavy-duty psychotropic medications with elders, particularly elders with dementia. So here's the kind of bottom line, is that these medications can be helpful when someone has a behavior that's maybe dangerous to themselves or dangerous to others. The challenge is these medications don't work very well, and they have a lot of side effects. To use an old nursing phrase, I guess if you are using these, evaluate them regularly, but start low and go slow. Because the challenge with these medications is, again, the effectiveness. We're not really believing that they can often do that good a job. They can have serious side effects, a much greater risk for falling down. When someone's sedated, they're not moving as well. They can be more at risk for things like UTIs. And again, that fall risk can be very serious, particularly things like the atypical antipsychotics, things like Seroquel, which again can save the day in certain occasions, can have some heart and cardiovascular risk. So again, be careful with these behaviors. And when we think about pain and depression that we'll be talking more about, be aware that behavior can be triggered by these things. And if you sedate someone, you might miss the most obvious things. For example, if I wake up in the morning and have a terrible toothache, maybe I know that I'm getting a deep infection, I can pick up the phone or go on my computer and call my dentist and say, hey, I have this terrible tooth pain. I think something's just blowing up on me. Can I sneak in and can you get me in? But you see, when someone has cognitive loss, they may not be able to say, nurse, my tooth hurts. I need to go to a dentist. They may not be able to say that to their husband or wife, right? But instead, they're experiencing pain. Now, how are any of us when it comes to pain? I would argue that pain causes us to withdraw, not eat, get cranky, get irritable. Maybe a person with a terrible toothache that we've missed slaps his caregiver because, again, he's agitated, right? we want to make sure we're seeing that underlying cause, and these medications can sometimes mask them. So I love my friend and colleague who's here with me today, Rhonda, from Trilogy. She, as a very distinguished nurse and leader, also says, as much as these medicines can be helpful in certain cases, that at Trilogy Health, we embrace the vision that hugs are better than drugs, which I think might even be a good byline for our whole conversation today about behavior. Okay, so managing difficult situations. I guess first of all, I think empathy is very important. When you are having a family member, let's say they're repeating themselves over and over again, or maybe you have a person in assisted living, they're taking things into their room and hoarding things. Someone who wants to be at the front door all the time and go, go, go. I think it's important not to be blaming. We're all human. We get frustrated ourselves as caregivers. But behavior really isn't just good or bad, it's just behavior. So have empathy, that old phrase, walk a mile in someone's shoes, because all of us have good days and bad days, including people with dementia. So I think people with dementia, we want to understand that the world they're living in is a tough one. They're trying to make sense of things. They're probably fatigued and exhausted by the end of the day, just trying to figure out where they are and what's happening around them. I think people with dementia can be less resilient, not be able to cope with illness, anxiety, pain, emotional upset the way many of us can. One little tip I have for you, by the way, that's not in the formal presentation, but watch your television and social media. I think there's so much negative news today. Be sure that you don't have your CNN or channel on 24/7 with the latest earthquake, flood, or pandemic disaster. I think sometimes people with dementia, a little worry can grow into a big fear. So try to channel that and not be so involved with the news 24/7. That's probably good advice for all of us now that I think about it. So again, empathy. What is it like to have Alzheimer's disease? Well, a dear friend of Virginia Bell and mine, who was one of the first people we worked with in Kentucky in the 1980s, was a retired nurse named Rebecca Riley. She was a younger onset person with dementia, diagnosed in her 50s. She was actually teaching at a nursing school. They changed all the curriculum, and she couldn't quite figure out the new curriculum, and this was sort of her first sign that something was going on. We actually asked Rebecca way back in the 1980s to keep a written diary of her experience, and here are some things she said. I can't say what I want. I'm afraid I can't express my thoughts in words, thus I remain silent and become depressed. I feel that people turn me off because I cannot express myself. And probably my all-time favorite, she says, I dislike social workers, nurses, and friends who do not treat me as a real person. I think that last one has stayed with me for 25 plus years because it reminds me that we want to treat people with dementia with respect and never treat them like there's nobody there. You want to not talk about them in front of them. You want to always kind of keep this going. And so I think, again, talking to people who have dementia, you can understand some of their sensitivities and fears. Even simple things like giving them choices. With my mother, Dorothy, I used to say, Mom, would you like to wear the blue sweater today or the red sweater today? And she would say red. Now, she almost always said red, but I think giving someone a choice, even a simple choice, can help them feel more in charge, more empowered with their life. So again, things like that can be very helpful in sort of understanding this lived experience with dementia. And again, not blaming or labeling the behavior, it's the disease, not the person, I think is very powerful. Now, here's a slide from the 1980s from a woman that Virginia Bell and I loved. We had permission to use all these pictures. Patricia, who was at our day center. Patricia was a very distinguished and talented, I'd almost call her a folk artist. She was very faith-based. And she had damage that affected her communication center of her brain. And she would sometimes cry out, kind of an audible, ah. Now, at our adult day center, the volunteers, of course, knew what was up, but you can imagine this was actually a behavior that could be agitating to the other people with dementia at the day program. So we were very puzzled by this, and it's a remark, back in the 80s, I think it's a testament, a remark to Virginia Bell's creativity, because we never wanted to give up. We always wanted to dig deep into someone's life story and understand kind of who they are, what they're about, and how to help. Well, we knew Patricia had been an artist. We also knew she was very faith-based and loved music and loved Christian music. So we discovered that when we set up a little table for her to do her art projects, and when she would listen, maybe even over headphones, to religious music, it was quite extraordinary. Her audible noises or crying out would completely stop, sometimes for an hour or two at a time. So to me, it's a great little mini case study about how when you have a behavior, probably a lesser program might have discharged her. Oh, you're just too disruptive. But you see, when you dig into the life story, when you really look into someone's past, this is how you can get some ideas about things they still enjoy that can help them feel safe, secure, and valued. I think all very powerful. So I like to think of it as we think about memory care and behaviors, that I think all of us have to kind of put on our Sherlock Holmes hat and become a detective and look for things that might be triggering the behavior. Not always. Sometimes these behaviors are hard to follow. But I have to tell you, I think 70, 80, on a good day, even 90% of the time, if you kind of think through, why did that caregiver get slapped? What happened? Well, maybe he entered the room in assisted living and startled the person. Maybe the person had pain. Maybe they were hungry. There were other issues. Often you can kind of be a detective and figure out some root causes, okay? So again, most behaviors have a trigger or some event, situation, or feeling that caused the behavior to happen. Keep an eye out for clues. This next bullet, I think, is really important. Is this behavior new or long-standing? Okay? I remember being at a support group once, and one of the people said to me, David, my mother's angry and paranoid and difficult and challenging. And I said, oh gosh, well, what was she like before dementia? And the caregiver said, angry, delusional, paranoid, and challenging. So mother kind of had always had some of these tendencies. Now, interestingly enough, when you get dementia, you're kind of rolling back a bit. I've had people who've been kind of ferocious, challenging people really become much more sweet-natured as their dementia advances. Maybe they've forgotten some of the tough things that have happened to them into their life. But sometimes when you have a long-standing behavior, if it's still going on, it is difficult to change. Now, let's say this sort of angry, difficult person had really been just very sweet-natured and happy, and now this behavior was happening. That's the one you want to double down on and really work hard. If this is a new behavior, maybe it is something we can change. And of course, we also want to look about when it happens, time of day of the week, certain situations. Maybe someone really falls apart after a family visit with the grandchildren. Perhaps it's just overstimulating, it's too much as well. So again, if it's a new behavior, what changes have happened recently? Is there an injury, a change in a room in assisted living, staffing changes, medication changes, etc.? So to recap, if someone has a long-standing behavior that's getting worse, still you want to try to approach them with music and art and try to look at their life story for things they might enjoy. If it's a brand new behavior, that's when you want to look for medical causes and certain triggers because we hopefully can change that course, okay? Again, behavior communicates a message. Spend some time with your family or with other helpers to figure out what that message might be. Now, what are some of the triggers? Okay. Medical causes including depression and pain. I'm going to pause for a moment and talk about depression and pain. The Alzheimer's Association suggests that about 40% of people who have Alzheimer's disease will have an experience with depression during the time of their illness. And there's actually research dating back to the 1950s that says people who have untreated long histories of clinical depression are at greater risk for cognitive illness or disorders later in life. So depression and Alzheimer's, depression and dementia kind of are fellow travelers. We don't even totally understand why. There's evidence, again, that if you have a long history of depression that's particularly untreated, it puts you at greater risk for even Alzheimer's disease. So you want to watch for depression. There are certain depression scales you can Google that are easy to do, but I think depression, to me, you kind of know it when you see it. Maybe your mother's been pretty happy and doing well, and now the cat jumps up on her lap and she just has a very flat expression. Talk to your doctor, deal with depression, because if someone's depressed and demented, it really is a blow. It's hard to get them functioning in a very positive way. Depression. Pain, again, I've mentioned toothaches, but pain, I think, is often a core cause of this really kind of wild, aberrant behavior. When you hear that someone's kind of trashed their room, if they're running up and down a hallway, if their behavior's really imploded on you, I think that can often be pain. Of course, sometimes urinary tract infection can also be an issue. Medication issues, too much, too little, what are they taking? I think this is an area, particularly if you have a family member who's living by themselves. It's very hard, I think, to live by yourself when you have Alzheimer's, even early on. We could do a whole other talk about even risk around financial abuse and bogus Canadian lotteries, things like that. But also, even when you've set up mom's pill box, it's really hard for them to take it correctly. They may be taking things over the counter that aren't appropriate. So watch for medication issues. They can trigger issues. Unmet needs, food, again, exercise, socialization. I think loneliness and isolation can be really a root cause of behavior. And the environment. Is it dark? Is it cluttered? I've had people who've had issues around paranoia and lots of challenging behaviors. You go to their house, the lighting's poor, the house is kind of cluttered. I think it can very much trigger some of these delusions or fixed false ideas that often come hand to hand with Alzheimer's disease and these other dementias. Medical triggers, I think we've covered most of this, but I want to just reiterate. Alzheimer's disease, my mother's neurologist, Dr. Bob Harbaugh in Santa Barbara, I thought he had a beautiful phrase. He said, Alzheimer's disease in so many ways is like a slow and lazy river. It's like a slow and lazy river. So sudden changes, again, doesn't mean that mom has gone to stage 7B of dementia last night at 10 o'clock. It means that she's ill or having some pain. Again, pain is that common culprit to behavior, again, and depression. So these are all key areas I want you to look for as a family member. And again, just to go back for 1 second here, these are treatable. Alzheimer's disease really is not treatable. Most of the dementias are slow, progressive, and irreversible. You want to treat things you can treat, okay? Very, very important. You want to keep the person as physically healthy as possible with exercise, good food, nutrition, good medical care, the proper meds. Make sure that they're not on too many medications. Dr. Jeff Cummings, who's now at Mayo Clinic, he's at the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Jeff Cummings, who started off at UCLA. I heard him speak a few years ago. He said the #1 cause of death for people with Alzheimer's disease is aspiration pneumonia, that swallowing reflex that begins to suffer. So again, get mom and dad on the minimal number of medications, I think is really a good goal for you for maybe 2022. Again, review the person's medications. I think we've covered this pretty well. And again, be aware that sometimes prescriptions can be interacting with each other in a negative way. Sometimes you see this with sleep issues, things like that. They're on certain drugs that really aren't good for brain functioning, Benadryl, things like that, over-the-counter medications. Talk to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist. So let's again look now at unmet needs as triggers. Okay, some of the basics here. Physical needs, hunger. Again, a person with Alzheimer's disease can't always tell you they're hungry or they have to go to the bathroom. So keep an eye out for their patterns around that, because this can be an area that can cause some agitation and stress. Emotional needs, loneliness, sadness, and anxiety. Now, I'm sure some of you on the webinar today work in professional settings. Maybe you're a CNA, an activity director, or a caregiver working in assisted living. I want to remind you that loneliness is a huge challenge for us, and isolation, particularly with the pandemic. So it's very powerful, I think. In my books, the Best Friends books, we talk about 30 things you can do in 30 seconds or less, or little 1 or 2 minute engagements. And I want you to remember that even on a busy day, you can sit with somebody, give them a little hand massage, you can compliment them on their necktie they're wearing, you can talk to them about their career. Mother, I can't believe you won the Nurse of the Year award for 3 years in a row in Cincinnati. These little moments of engagement truly add up. And so I think it's very important to remember that activities are an essential part of quality of life. And I think when people are busy and engaged with activity, behaviors fall. So again, what are some other unmet needs? Physical needs, emotional needs, need for engagement, meaningful engagement. Try to come up with a project, maybe making dog biscuits for the local animal shelter, sorting out drawers, putting together, writing your holiday cards together, arranging flowers. I think we all have a need to be needed, and this lack of self-esteem and purpose can also be triggering for behavior. So again, try to create a lively, interesting day. I think in so many ways is this treatment for Alzheimer's disease. Again, behavior can tell you that something is going on, so pay attention whenever you can. So a few environmental triggers. I've already mentioned clutter and lighting. Noise. Is the environment noisy, making the person uncomfortable, overstimulated, or unable to hear others? Lighting. Is the environment too dimly lit for the person to see where they're going, raising the risk of falls? Is there glare from windows? The older I can't remember the exact number, I think it's something like 7 or 8 or maybe even 10 or 12, they need a lot more light than the rest of us. So Be aware of lighting in your home. Try to get better light sources, increase lighting. Natural light, of course, is wonderful. Do be aware that the opposite is true, though. Too much light. Glare can be physically painful for the older eyes. So if you've got windows and someone's sitting in the kitchen or a family room and the sun is, again, hitting their eyes, this can be a trigger for agitation or behavior. And then finally, contrast. The person with dementia is trying to kind of navigate their way through the world. And let's say you have a bathroom where everything's white, the white floor, the white paint and the white commode. They may not even be able to see what's in there. So put that kind of black lid on the toilet bowl, put in a strip along the baseboard that's a different color. High contrast colors, easy to read, all of these things can be very, very helpful, particularly in professional settings as well. Environmental triggers in-home care. The progression of dementia calls for appropriate changes to the environment, even within the familiarity of a home. So again, remove clutter and kind of reconsider the home almost as you would a care community. You want to Alzheimer's proof your home. Be aware of having the water temperature not being too high. Grab bars are very important. Fall risk, get rid of little area rugs people can fall on. And of course, we haven't talked a lot today about wandering and elopement, but you can maybe put some things on doors, at least will sound some alarms if someone does get up at 2 in the morning and wants to leave the house. Life story work is a key element of the best friends approach and contemporary memory care. I know my friends at Trilogy do a lot of work when someone's new to the building to discover their hobbies and interests and talents. You see, a person with dementia may not be able to tell you that they're born in New Orleans, they love Tabasco sauce and hot sauce. If someone moves into a really good memory care neighborhood, you've hopefully done that good work so you can offer them their Tabasco sauce on the meatloaf. So life story is something that I think is really powerful. Now, a few of you may be saying, well, gosh, David, it's my mother. I know her life story. Well, still, we do know these things, but try to kind of dig a little bit deep and think about her life and some elements that make her proud or some key elements. And you might even consider doing like a little top 10 card at home of her life story. So let's say she does have to go to the hospital, or she goes to a day program, or you maybe have an in-home worker come in to help out now and then. You want to be able to give them this little top 10 card about my mother, about her likes and dislikes and preferences to help them make a better connection. When it comes to behavior, the life story can give us some clues of things that still give them pleasure or some skills they have or activities they might enjoy. They can also do the opposite in a sense, but you can also discover problem areas. Maybe someone has bad wartime memories. Maybe in this example, the person's afraid of dogs, right? And maybe not everyone knows that. So you want to be careful to know that if they're afraid of dogs, you want to make sure they don't go to the pet therapy program. They may not be able to say, I'd rather not do it. Instead, they may come and have that stress and agitation. Trauma is very interesting. Again, could be a whole other talk. But it's fascinating. Our brains, one of my friends who's a neuroscientist tells me that our brains are programmed to remember happy memories over sad memories, with the exception of trauma. So often our memory, we often forget some of those sort of sad, negative things, but trauma does remain. And if your family member does have trauma in their life, maybe work with professionals to develop a good care plan and figure out what would be the best way to help them overcome that. Certainly empathy, understanding, I'm here for you. Particularly if someone's having hallucinations, you never want to say, now, you just imagine that, that's not true, everything's fine. Hallucinations can be very real, very profound. You want to make sure that you help them feel that you're there for them. Knowing topics that are negative for the person can, again, help you respond sensitively to when they do come up. Okay, a life story. Know some ways to skillfully redirect the person when needed. A redirection, let's say that mom is at the door, she thinks she's late for work, she wants to go. You can't just drag her away from there. You want to try to skillfully engage her. So listen to what they're saying. Oh my gosh, Mom, you're late for work. Well, I think today might be your day off. Let's talk about that. I want to hear more about your work. Show empathy. Mom, I know being on time is very important to you, and let's make a schedule for the week, okay? Bring up a favorite subject or key element. You redirect somebody by saying, Mother, what's this I remember that you always made the best cheesecake? Would you teach me your recipe? Hey, I pulled out a few of your old cookbooks. I'm having a party next week. I could sure use your help would you help me figure out a good way to make your famous meatloaf? And again, these are the kinds of things you can do to kind of redirect someone from going one direction that you don't want them to be going to. And of course, very basic, but offer favorite treats or activities. I find that many of my friends and people with dementia, they may say no to 100 things, but they rarely say no to ice cream. So again, things like that, a favorite treat can be very, very helpful, particularly if you know that they have a certain flavor that they like. Offer them their chocolate chip or their black walnut ice cream or whatever they particularly always enjoyed and loved. So again, when a person's upset, we want to treat them the way any of us want to be treated. So if your mother's agitated or upset, start with the basics. Ask them what's wrong. They may not be able to tell you, but you might gain some insight as to what is happening. Sit with them for a minute. Be present. Let them know you're there. Let them know that you're there and they can feel safe and secure and valued. Show concern, show affection, maybe offer a treat or beverage. Again, life story work. If you know that this person was born on a farm and loved growing up in a small town, talk to her about it. Bring back some of these happy memories. These are the ways we can kind of begin to shift the mood from that agitation to a sense of calm. Okay? My friend Virginia, who I'm kind of excited to honor today, she'll be 100 years old this year. So many elders have had productive and meaningful lives. Activity and purpose supports happiness and calms and lowers the chances of behavior that is challenging. So let's kind of end my presentation today by, again, trying to give you some ideas about ways to, I think, increase happiness and increase engagement, increase connection. And I like to say that when it comes to dementia care, boredom is the enemy. Boredom is the enemy. So there's a lot you can do if you're at home to, I think, kind of amp up your activities and make things better. Music, probably one of the most effective things. There's actually research that people with Alzheimer's disease retain song lyrics and music even longer than they do spoken or written language. So bring on the music. Maybe get one of those smart speakers that you can, say, Alexa, play Frank Sinatra or play country western music or play Dolly Parton. Make sure you have music playing, Broadway musicals, musical television programming, music, The Music Man, or things like that can be very good. So music, again, can be very therapeutic. I remember years ago, I had a caregiver who told me that she could put on Nat King Cole and some of the great music in the bedroom when she was trying to get her husband up in the morning. And she'd be playing, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And the husband would start singing it, and they'd kind of dance their way into the bathroom, dance their way into the shower, and that music helped her turn that no from yes. Exercise. I find that many people with dementia kind of love it when you talk to them about, hey, let's use it or lose it and kind of get going. Doctor's orders, mom, doctor wants you to have some exercise. So you can, look on YouTube for the chair yoga classes or Tai Chi or get some of these TheraBand stretches, or say, Mom, I need some exercise today. I need a walk. Would you come with me? I could sure use your company. Versus Mother, the doctor says you need to exercise. Make it engaging. Chores, organizing drawers, baking together, cleaning, dusting, sweeping, making the bed together. Even though maybe your family member doesn't do it quite as well as they used to, I think that can be really a sweet thing to engage them in. Again, this feeling of purpose and productivity. Time with children and pets, doing things for others. I'm a big fan of making dog biscuits to local animal shelter, writing letters to first responders, wrapping presents together, flower arrangements, word games, and trivia. It's quite extraordinary, but the way our brain works, even someone who's quite demented, they may still know these old saying. It's raining cats and dogs, waste not, want not. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So having some fun with oversized word games, old sayings. You can Google, one of my favorites, just Google old animal sayings. There's a million of them that are really fun to do. And of course, spiritual and religious activities. Not everybody is religious, but many people are. So, the rosary beads, prayers, old spirituals, all of that can be really wonderful. Along with just what I call more broader spiritual care, painting, doing arts, reading poetry, being outdoors, being in nature. I think all of us have a spirit that we want to connect to that can be very, very powerful. So as I wind down my talk and turn it over to my colleague, Barbara, I just want to, again, thank you all for all the work you're doing. I think many of you are family members. I've been a family member myself from my mother as well as a professional in this field. Caregiving can be emotionally, financially, and physically stressful. It can be particularly tough when you have a lot of behaviors that are so challenging, refusal to do personal care, things like that. I just want to endorse the Alzheimer's Association for their great helpline that can give you lots of great tips on bathing and behaviors like that. There's certainly some great research on their website. My friends at Trilogy are always willing to, to answer questions or give you some ideas. As you think about the new year ahead, 2022, I want to encourage you to learn all you can. When you're an informed caregiver, everything goes much better. Develop a common script or approach whenever possible. Sometimes there's a behavior, maybe you have 6 siblings and all 6 of you are doing different things. I think that is not a very good recipe for success. So, try to come up with a common theme or common strategy. One of my favorites, for example, a friend of mine who moved his mother to memory care and was kind of fearful about how it would work. He was a little worried because his siblings all had different attitudes about it, and they kind of finally decided to make the move. Well, he sort of scripted everybody. Mom, you need to be here for now. The doctor wants you to be here for now. Mom, you need to build your strength. And I love that kind of affirmative line. Mother, the reason why you're here now, the doctor wants you to be here. You want to build your strength. And actually, after a couple weeks, Mother was sort of the belle of the ball, everyone's favorite, and she really settled in beautifully into memory care. So again, that's much better than 6 different siblings saying 6 different reasons when she says, I want to go home. Again, develop this common approach, common script for a behavior. I think we've covered the Alzheimer's Association. About half my career has been with the association, so really very supportive. And do consider not waiting and waiting and waiting to use services. Make a plan. Most of these dementias are slow and progressive, and so you want to be ahead of the game. You want to make sure your legal financial affairs are in order, you have your plans. I'm a big fan of getting some in-home help if you need some in-home help to start your services. Make sure you try to find someone who's lively and engaging. I love adult day centers because, again, they're community-based. They can really be very helpful in getting your person surrounded by activity engagement. And, of course, assisted living for memory care, you see many of them. Pick a place that is engaging and lively, that has a defined philosophy of care. Visit them and decide which one you'd want to go to. You don't want to have to make a decision in an emergency. So, again, be thoughtful as a caregiver, plan ahead, and this is a good way to really come out at the end of this experience feeling proud and really feeling good that you've actually done a great job for your family member and actually being able to give them a certain quality of life throughout this illness. So again, thank you very much for letting me kick off this session today. Just a few more resources. Of course, the Alzheimer's Association has this 24-hour helpline, 800-272-3900. You can read more about my work and the books I've written at the www.bestfriendsapproach.com. And I think thank you to my friends at Trilogy. I think they even have some door prizes today for some free books. And of course, Trilogy's website is there as well. So I'm going to step down now and I think turn it over to Barbara, who will present again on this topic. And then we'll both be available for some questions and discussion at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a tough act to follow for sure, but I will do my best. I want to welcome you all to the Understanding and Responding to Dementia-Related Behaviors. As David said, I'm Barbara Statz, and I'm a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association. The reason I got involved with Alzheimer's Association was back in 2008, my late husband, Al, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So after the initial shock, we both did everything we could to learn about the disease, and then we both decided that we really wanted to educate as many people as possible about this devastating disease. So it's my hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll have a broader knowledge of understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. Today we're going to review the challenging behavioral aspects of Alzheimer's disease and the strategies to use to help them. By the end of this program, you're going to be able to identify common triggers for behaviors associated with dementia, know the process for assessing and identifying challenging behaviors, and list the strategies to address some common dementia-related behaviors. Behavior symptoms may be caused by physical discomfort, such as fatigue, hunger, thirst, full bladder, uncomfortable room temperature. Symptoms may also be caused by overstimulation, sadness and loss, or boredom. These causes may be hard to sort out, but the next slides will be helpful for you to understand and respond to the needs that are expressed through behaviors. So we're going to explore how to understand and address common dementia-related behaviors by using a 4-step approach. When someone is experiencing restlessness or pacing of any kind of distress, they may be experiencing anxiety or agitation. You know, when Al was in a facility, he would give the caregiver a really hard time each night when she tried to give him a shower. He would get very agitated and he'd yell at her, and I finally figured out what I thought was the problem. First of all, he was used to showering in the morning, not in the evening, and also there had never been another woman who had ever seen him naked in the last 40 years, besides me. So when I told them that, they were able to switch the caregivers to a male and the process in the morning, and he was much more agreeable to showering. So let's listen to Anne's situation, and then we can explore how to use these 4 steps. Anne was a 35-year-old woman with Alzheimer's disease, was pacing the hallways in her house in the evening saying, "I need to go, I need to go." She would not stop walking even for meals. Her family would give her sandwiches to eat while she was walking. Though she used a cane, she was getting blisters on her feet and had lost weight from not eating. Her family would ask Anne to sit down, but as soon as she sat, she would pop right back up and start walking. Anne had worked for 40 years as a nurse on the night shift, and her agitation began every evening. Her shoes were worn, and she appeared to be in pain as she walked. So let's talk about these 4 steps. The first one is detect and connect. Listen to the frustration and try to understand the feeling. What was Anne feeling? Perhaps pain, restlessness, what else? Try to identify any triggers for the behavior. What were Anne's triggers? Ask yourself who, what, where, when, and how questions. Check for sundowning. Sundowning is a neurological phenomenon associated with confusion and restlessness. The causes are really unknown, but sundowning usually occurs in the late afternoon or early evening. We know her actions occurred in the evening. Explore whether these behaviors occur with particular people or around certain activities. Second step is to address the physical issues. Assess for pain, infection, medication interaction, or other medical issues, and intervene if possible, if needed. What do you think the physical issues Anne may have been experiencing? Well, we know that Anne had blisters, so perhaps an appointment with her foot doctor should have been scheduled. Also, a new pair of shoes needed to be purchased. Urinary tract infections can cause pain, which will cause abrupt agitation. UTIs occur often in older people. And if you suspect a UTI, call your doctor for an assessment and lab work. Be sure the person is kept active during the day. This will help discharge energy and feel tired at the end of the day. You know, when he was at home, Al would sit in his chair and watch TV or stare out into space. So I started taking him to the local daycare center in our area. That worked wonderfully because by the time he came home in the afternoon, he had been kept busy all day and he slept well at night. See if the person is hungry, thirsty, or lacking social interaction. To avoid anxiety or agitation from any of these triggers, provide the person with access to appropriate healthy snacks and beverages, and offer them often. Instead of only giving Anne sandwiches, perhaps the family could have given her small snacks during the day, and be sure that she was eating enough. Also, we don't know what her liquid intake was. She may have been dehydrated. Constipation may trigger agitation, so make sure their diet includes plenty of fruit and fiber, fluids, and sufficient exercise. Check to see if the area surrounding the person may have triggered physical discomfort or distress. Now, step 3, address the emotional needs. Again, let them know that you understand what they're going through and that they're frustrated and upset and that you want to help them feel more comfortable. Check to see if something has happened to upset the person and trigger hurt feelings, anger, worry, frustration, loneliness, or other distress. Maintain a calm voice and use reassuring words. If you can't make a change in the situation that reduces the anxiety, focus on changing the person's level of agitation by comforting or distracting them. Once agitation is reduced some, offer to engage in soothing activity that the person enjoys. Al loved music of all kinds. So when he'd get agitated, I would put on some classical or jazz music, and that always seemed to calm him down. If they're fearful, lonely, or sad, provide reassurance and companionship. When they sense that someone understands, is there to help, and is on their side, they will often become calmer and more relaxed. The last step is reassess and plan for the next time. Did your responses help? Do you need to explore other potential causes and solutions? If so, what can you do differently? Assume that the person will feel anxious or agitated again in the future. So make a plan for addressing those feelings. Be sure to include what to do if the situation escalates or your interventions are ineffective. So now let's apply the steps to confusion and suspicion. When someone with Alzheimer's is confused, they may not recognize familiar people or places. If confusion is coupled with suspicion, they may accuse others of stealing, being unfaithful, and so on. It's difficult for caregivers to understand why that person doesn't know them or the fact that they're challenging their character. My dad had dementia, and he became extremely suspicious. My mom and dad were visiting, and my dad wanted to hide his wallet because he didn't trust the stranger that was in our house, when actually that stranger was his grandson, but he didn't recognize him. So let's look at Anne again. Then we can explore taking the 4 steps we talked about earlier and how to help her confusion and suspicion. When Anne's family comes to visit and the evening begins, she becomes very suspicious that people are trying to get into her home and are watching her through her big picture window. She becomes suspicious of her family for not making the people go away and that they must all be in cahoots against her. So, first, let's detect and connect. Try to stay calm as you explore. What is the confused or suspicious behavior? When is it happening? Anne's behavior began in the evening, so perhaps she was experiencing sundowning. With whom did it occur? Was someone in Anne's family causing her suspicions? And where does the confusion and suspicion occur? How does it manifest itself? Check the environment for potential sources of confusion. Steps 2, address the physical issues. Rule out any medical issues, again, such as infection, low blood sugar levels, etc. If they're experiencing pain, see how you can make them more comfortable. If they're taking pain medications, talk to the doctor to see if there's any side effects or interactions that may be happening. Assess for physical discomfort due to the environment, overstimulation, or fatigue, and modify the environment if needed. Anne's problem could have been that she was seeing her family's reflection in her big window and thought they were strangers outside. By closing the drapes each evening, this would take away the reflection of the family. Also, maybe the lighting needed to be turned up inside the house so there were no shadows. Respond with brief and accurate explanations, but avoid arguing. Offer corrections as gentle suggestions. Don't escalate your energy level, as this would just cause the person to match it or even increase it. Show photos or other reminders to trigger the person's recognition of what may have happened. If items are lost and no one can find them, try to find a solution by duplicating them or have on hand multiples of the often used items. Al lost his wallet a lot. So I went to the dollar store and I bought several cheap wallets, so when he would lose one, I would just get another one and hand it to him. That always seemed to make him smile and calmed him down. Just be sure there isn't anything of value in those wallets. Remember that you need to diffuse the situation, not convince the person of the truth. Step 3, address the emotional needs. Let them know you understand that they are upset and in what ways. Let them know you will take care of the situation. Repeat this message as they calm down. Remember to enter their reality. Let them know you want to help and are on their side. Agree and acknowledge that you understand and apologize if needed. I'm sorry this is happening. Let's see what we can do about it. Try not to take the person's confusion or behavior personally. I know this is difficult when they're lashing out at you, but it's a disease that's causing the behavior, not the reflection on their trust in you. There's an expression in the Alzheimer's circles that say, a person with Alzheimer's is not giving you a hard time. A person with Alzheimer's is having a hard time. Step 4, reassess and plan for the next time. Did your new response help? Do you need to explore other options and solutions? If you think there may be other solutions, try them. Continue to reassess through the process and assume that they will feel suspicious or confused again, and make a plan for that, because I can assure you it probably will happen again. So now let's talk about aggression. Sometimes a person with Alzheimer's will become aggressive, verbally, physically, or both. You may be able to identify a trigger for this behavior, but there's going to be times when it may appear for no reason at all. So again, let's look at Anne, and this time her husband Bill, how they deal with her aggressive behavior. And then we'll explore those 4 steps again. Anne's husband Bill is standing at the back of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He's watching television. Anne walks in and tells him sharply, "You aren't the boss here." Bill ignores the comment and continues to watch television. Anne comes closer, raises her voice, and says, "You can't tell me what to do." When Bill doesn't respond, Anne comes up to Bill and hits him on the arm with her balled fist. Prior to her dementia symptoms, Anne was quite calm by nature and would never have exhibited this kind of behavior. But lately, her outbursts are becoming more frequent. She continues to come at Bill, who retreats from her and locks himself in the bathroom to avoid further conflict. He does not have a cell phone with him. Since both had been avid hunters when they were younger, there are guns in the house, but Bill has removed the ammunition. So, first step is to detect and connect. Identify the immediate triggers for the aggression. What do you think it is? May not be logical, but rather an automatic reaction to something they are perceiving. Ask yourself the who, what, when, and how questions to explore a situation. Gently say their name. Let them know that you understand are there to help. Apologize if it seems it would calm the person down. You may be apologizing for something you didn't do, but remember, we're dealing with their reality, not yours. What do you think the triggers in this situation were for Anne? Well, I would imagine Bill standing in the back of the room with his arms crossed came across as a pretty aggressive action to Anne. Also, he would not talk with her. That must have been very frustrating to Anne. Finally, his rejection of her by locking himself in the bathroom must not have only been hurtful, but also giving her a feeling of rejection and that he didn't care about her words or her feelings. Step 2, address the physical issue. Rule out medical issues again. Some people lash out when they're in pain. Limit or remove any distractions. Screen the environment for obvious triggers, excess noise, change in the normal schedule, or something they thought was a threat. What was on the TV? It could have been construed by Anne as violent. Make adjustments that you can safely make. Protect everyone involved so no one gets hurt. Children may need to be asked to leave the room, or you may need to ask others to help you. Step 3, address the emotional triggers. Look for emotional triggers. Are they perceiving danger? Are they scared, surprised, alarmed, in pain? Focus on the feelings, not the facts. Be positive and reassuring. Again, let them know you are there for them and will stay to help work out the situation. So do you think Anne was afraid of Bill's demeanor? Well, I certainly would. He was standing with his arms crossed. That sounds sort of aggressive to me. If Bill's attitude had been different and he showed concern and tried to reassure Ann, she may not have become aggressive. Step 4, to reassess and plan for the next time. Again, once you've settled on interventions that are effective in calming the person down, that behavior will probably happen again and may even increase in degree. Make a plan to avoid being surprised. With aggressive behavior, having a plan in place and including what to do if behavior escalates is crucial. The best way to avoid difficult or dangerous situations is to have a plan to ensure safety before even the first incident takes place. This may include alerting the neighbors about the person's condition, letting the local EMTs or the police know about the person's diagnosis, so they're prepared when they get a call to your home. Keep your cell phone charged and with you at all times. This is very important. In Bill's case, it would have been very much easier if things had escalated to the point of violence or a threat of violence. But he had locked himself in the bathroom and had no way of making a cell phone call for help. Get rid of guns in your home. Even though there was no ammunition, if Ann was to take a gun out in public, the police would have to assume that it was loaded and take appropriate action, which could be disastrous. Consider a personal alarm system. Now, we had an alarm system in our house, and I always turned it on at night, even though I was positive I would hear Al get up in the night. But one night, I was so tired from lack of sleep and stress that I didn't hear him get up. At 5 in the morning, the alarm went off. I went running to the front door and asked him what he was doing. He was standing there in his pajamas, bare feet, with snow on the porch. When I asked him what he was doing, he said that he had to go to work, but he didn't know which way to go. So I told him it was early. Let's go back to bed and we'll figure it out later. That worked, and he went right back to bed. You know, I was able to reassure him that we would figure it out later together and redirect him. There may come a time when you can't care for the person at home. Talk with your chapter staff to discuss alternatives in your area and plan ahead. Al and I looked at various facilities early on in his progression because he wanted to know what kind of a place he may be living in when I could no longer care for him. And I wanted to know what choices were available before the time we needed replacement. It can help to get others involved in the caregiving. Give yourself a break. Even though the person is acting this way because of the disease, you have feelings that need to have attention. Get others to help in the care of your loved one. Friends, family, church members, the Alzheimer's Association. 2 of my friends from church each took a day each week to be with Al so I could take those days off. This is absolutely important for your health. I would go to a movie, get a massage, just something for me. So, dang it. When aggression gets dangerous, most behaviors are upsetting but harmless. But if they become dangerous to themselves or others, you must call 911 immediately so more help can contain the person's behavior. 911 is meant to keep everyone safe. Remember, not only your right, but it's your responsibility to make this call when the situation has escalated to a crisis level and people are at risk. Let the dispatcher know that the person has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. This will prevent them from making the wrong assumptions, for instance, that they may be under the influence of alcohol or drugs. So let's discuss one last behavior, repetition. Persons with Alzheimer's may repeat words, questions, or behaviors. Repetition is common, but quite frustrating to the caregivers. When someone asks the same question over and over and over again all day long, it grates on your nerves pretty quickly. But avoid trying to convince the person or trying to give your viewpoint. The person can't remember asking the question, even if it's only minutes before. So let's look back at the 4 steps again when dealing with repetition. Detect and connect. Stay calm and be patient. Accept behavior. Don't fight to stop it. In order to intervene successfully, you will need to work with the behavior rather than against it. Try to determine what is causing the repetitive questions. Step 2, address the physical issues. As always, look for pain first. Are they experiencing pain? And if so, make the necessary adjustments to alleviate the pain. Check the physical environment for triggers and make any needed changes. Step 3, address the emotional needs. Focus on the emotion the person is exhibiting. Is it anxiety, frustration, fear? Say something to recognize that emotional state to help move to the next set of intervention. Keep in mind emotion behind the behavior may be fueling the repetition. You may diminish repetition by addressing the emotional need. Briefly answer the person's questions or concerns. Don't ignore them. This will only agitate them even more. Remember, repetition is part of the disease, and you're going to need to deal with it. Engage the person in purposeful activity to redirect their focus. Only one way to deal with their repetition would be to acknowledge their concern and then try and redirect. For instance, if they're saying they want to go home continuously, you might say something like, I know you want to go home, but you know what, we're going to eat dinner really soon. So why don't we talk about going home after dinner? That way you have acknowledged their desire to go home, but you've redirected them. And chances are that after dinner, they'll forget about the repetition. Turn behavior into activity with positive focus. Offer repetitive activity such as cleaning off the countertop, folding laundry, or setting a table. In step 4, reassess and plan for the next time. Again, is the new response working, or do you need to explore other causes and situations? Try to maintain emotional distance from the behavior. You may need to adopt a calm stance, use deep breathing, recite a meaningful phrase or prayer. Keep remembering this reflects the disease, not the person. And expect repetition to happen again. Anticipating and planning helps you be prepared to handle it. Did you know that 60% of the people with Alzheimer's or other dementia wander? This may take place with no warning, so many caregivers are unprepared. You can't afford to be unprepared, so be sure and take precautions before this happens. Wandering can be dangerous with someone with dementia. Call the police immediately. A sort of funny story now about my dad was that my mom woke up in the middle of the night and my dad was getting dressed. So she asked him what he was doing, and he replied that he had to get out of there because his wife would be really upset if she knew he was with another woman. So my mom was able to calm him down, thankfully, explain that she was his wife, and get him back to bed. We can laugh about that today, but it could have ended much differently if he had gotten out of the house and started wandering before she woke up. Some tools to help in case your loved one wanders are offered by the Alzheimer's Association. Medic Alert has teamed up with the Alzheimer's Association to create the Safe Return Program. It has a national information and photo database operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a toll-free crisis line. It works through Alzheimer's Association's chapters across the country, law enforcement, and other emergency responders. It is a program where you can purchase a piece of jewelry for the person with dementia to wear, which has their name, ID number, and contact information on it. Now, since Al always wore a necklace with his allergies listed, he had no problem wearing one for his Alzheimer's. Here are some excellent resources. I don't have the time to go over them all today, but I would like to touch on a couple. And I also would like to encourage you to take a picture with your cell phone so that you'll have these handy for future use. Alzheimer's Association Community Resource Finder contains a wealth of knowledge about Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Helpline, 800-272-3900. This phone number is manned 24/7, Christmas, Easter, 10 p.m., 3 a.m., and it has trained clinicians who are ready to answer any questions that you may have or just a shoulder to cry on. So, caring for Al was the absolute most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. But it was also one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. You know, there's going to be great challenges every day, and you won't always know what to do or how to act. But as we've learned, it's okay. You are only human, and you can only do the best job that you can do. But you're not alone. Reach out to your family, friends, reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. Again, here's the Alzheimer's Help 24/7 helpline, and alz.org is the website. They're there waiting to help you in any way they can. I want to thank you for attending this educational presentation, and I hope it's been useful in learning more ways to deal with dementia in meaningful ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to David and to Barbara. We really appreciate both of your presentations. They're so helpful, and the knowledge that you shared and your personal stories are going to go a long way to helping so many people. Thank you both so much. Okay, so I do have some questions that are here in the chat. One of the first ones we got is, when your loved one with dementia or Alzheimer's acts out in public, how do you handle that situation? So that could be, they put the example here of a grocery store, but if you think of another public arena.
Okay, great. I'll stand up.
Okay.
Logistics here.
Oh, yes.
So when your loved one acts out in public, what to do? Well, you know, years ago, I think people were really stressed out about this because Alzheimer's disease wasn't really well known, had a lot of stigma. But today, 1 in 3 families are touched by Alzheimer's. So I think I would be open and honest and maybe just whisper to the wait staff or the person, you know, gee, I'm so sorry, my uncle has Alzheimer's disease, something like that. I think just to be open, you might find that the waiter says, my uncle had Alzheimer's disease as well. Years ago, the Alzheimer's Association actually put little cards out. We could print a card saying, you know, please pardon my family member, he or she has Alzheimer's disease or dementia. So I think I would try not to be ashamed or embarrassed, just be very open, and you might actually find an ally or somebody there who'd be very, very helpful. Even here in Kentucky, I know in Lexington, they have an initiative to create dementia-friendly communities. The Alzheimer's Association has been very involved with them. You might check to see if there's a dementia-friendly committee in your hometown, because that, along with many other programs, I think we're trying really hard to educate the public about dementia and to make the community more dementia-friendly as well. One other quick tip, and then Barbara, if you have any ideas, you're welcome to step up, but you know, my sense is, too, that you can also adapt your schedule. You know, don't take perhaps mother to a really crowded church service on a Sunday morning. Maybe go on a off night or a Wednesday or Tuesday for an off service, or even just go to the chapel and sit in the pews. Go to a restaurant off hours when it's not so crowded, and that can be another way to tackle this issue.
I do have one example. Al loved children, and he would always be very friendly with children. And when he developed Alzheimer's, it seemed like he got even more friendly and would go up and pat the child or whatever. And so I could see the look on some of the parents' faces like, oh my gosh, you know, is he a predator or what? And I would just quietly say to them, you know, he has dementia, he doesn't mean any harm, and your child's okay. And that would seem to work.
Those are great. Thank you guys both so much. A second one is, how do I respond when my mother asks if I've seen or heard from loved ones who've passed away many years ago?
Okay, go ahead.
One of the things you could do, you know that person passed away, but you don't have, you're not going to tell them that. It's not going to do any good. You're just going to get into an argument. So you might say, well, tell me about your dad. It seems like you really want to be involved and know about him. Could you tell me a little bit about how he was when you were growing up, or anything that you can remember about him? Change the subject, redirect.
Pardon me, I'll comment on this as well, Barbara. It's really a tough one when you think about all of us wanting to be honest with our family members and yet not bringing up painful memories. I think that I would probably the first time, if it were my own family member, be truthful. So one of my friends, for example, when her mother asked about her mother, who had died many years earlier, my friend said, "Gosh, mother, my grandmother, your mother, I can't believe she passed away 7 years ago. Mother, didn't she make the best lemon meringue pie?" And I thought that was just a genius way of kind of handling it, because she told the truth, but then she kind of pushed the memory on to something happy where they could discuss their pie recipes, and kind of a very special memory of grandmother. Now, again, the mother cried a bit and said, "Nobody told me," which of course is very painful. But at least they could have kind of a cathartic moment and talk about the mother and talk about the pie. Now, where I totally agree with Barbara, 15, 20 minutes later, say, where's mother? You want to kind of go to plan B. I think saying, tell me more about her, and what is, when did she teach you how to drive, and is she a good cook? And I think all of that can sometimes, kind of draw a person out away from that memory. Sometimes in dementia care, when it comes to behavior, I say to myself, David, what won't work? What won't work? And it probably won't work to print up the obituary and show it to them and argue with them and correct them. Often just kind of a light touch is a good way to handle some of these sensitive issues.
That was great. Good answers to both of those. We have a participant here who says, I have a dementia patient who tries to and wants to take her melatonin during the day. How do I redirect this, and is it dangerous? And this also might be a good time, too, if you wanted to talk about sundowning, too, how they sometimes dementia patients will sleep during the day and be up all night.
Sure. Barbara, I'll jump in. I've never been asked that question before. My mother wants to take the melatonin at the wrong time of day. I'm not a physician, I'm not a pharmacist, but I don't believe melatonin is particularly harmful to someone. It's more of a natural supplement. I'm not sure it would be a big problem if she took it earlier. It's not like a traditional sleep medicine. I guess talk to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist about this. Often out of sight is out of mind, figuratively and literally with dementia. So, maybe put the melatonin pills or bottle out of sight or in a drawer somewhere where your family member can't see it. Shannon mentioned this idea of this phrase sundowning, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. There's a long historic literature that, late in the afternoon, people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementia often get a bit agitated. And we call that phrase sundowning, which I think is a bit old-fashioned nowadays, but we still sometimes talk about it. I've read articles that say it's related to the cycles of the moon and the universe and other kinds of things. My own suspicion is that people just get fatigued. A person with dementia, they're trying to figure things out and maybe even setting a table, like where do the forks and knives and spoons go? It takes double or triple the effort. So I think a lot of that's exhaustion. For sundowning behaviors, create a little afternoon ritual, have an afternoon tea party, make sure maybe some of them would benefit from a short nap, get some natural light in there, some sunshine, music, all of these things can be very good. A friend of mine actually has a little afternoon tea. You might even want to have an afternoon happy hour and do some things like this to kind of fill in that gap about the sundowning behavior.
I don't know if this would work or not, but one of the thoughts I just had was maybe if they're continuously asking about this melatonin and you can't get them off the track, maybe give them a placebo of some sort, which I'm sure you could get from the doctor or whatever, but just something that will make them think they're taking their melatonin. And then they can take it, of course, at night when it's the time to take it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point, Barbara. And a lot of those melatonin pills come in a gummy form, like a melatonin gummy. So maybe you could give them a Flintstone vitamin gummy instead or something.
Great idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, here's another one. Are there any tips for getting an actual diagnosis if your loved one seems fine while they're with the doctor, but they're struggling at home?
Okay. Well, having started my career at the university with a memory disorder clinic, this was a common question. And one thing I'll just kind of observe is that when a person with dementia goes to their doctor these days, it's probably like a 4, 5, 6 minute appointment. It might even be virtual. And I've always believed, I think Barbara, you'd probably agree too with your family member, that people with Alzheimer's, they can kind of give an Academy Award-winning performance at times when they really need to, when they're at the doctor's office. So certainly one thing, if you see mother having behaviors, putting the remote control in the freezer, or getting lost in familiar neighborhoods, or spending money erratically, I would definitely send the doctor an email, a fax, phone ahead of time, let them know what's up. because it's often hard to do in person, and suggest that they do some kind of cognitive evaluation. It is really important, I think, to get a good medical evaluation and workup. You can diagnose the various dementias these days. We know enough about them. And something like 60% of people with Alzheimer's are diagnosed quite late in illness, which I think really is tough, because we think, particularly with some newer medicines that are kind of coming out, you want to start those very early in the dementia process. So I think keep a good line of communication up with the doctor. If the doctor says you need this test, or I want to do this for you, it's often better than you saying that to your mother. I also am a fan of what we call neuropsychological testing. This is like you probably have seen this on television, where the doctor will say, count backwards by 7, who's the president of the United States, and I'm going to give you 3 words, and then 10 minutes later repeat them. The neuropsych evaluations, which Medicare covers, can really give you a good insight about your family members' cognitive abilities, even some of their strengths. And let's say you have 5 family members, and 3 of them say something's wrong with mother, and the other 2 say nothing's wrong with mother, just leave her alone. When the doctor writes that letter, the neuropsychologist, your mother thinks President Eisenhower's in the White House, she thinks she's 37 or 87, that can often be a way to overcome that kind of family disagreement and help you make a game plan for assisted living or adult day centers or in-home help or things like that.
This is interesting with that question, because I actually went through the same thing. Al and I went to our doctor for our annual physicals, and I told him when I was in with the doctor that I thought he was having some memory issues. And then he went in with Al, and he brought both of us together, and he said, Al, Barbara thinks you're having some memory issues. What do you think? Well, of course he said no, But, and the doctors agreed with him. He said, I don't think so either. So I was just stunned by that. And it took me a couple of weeks, but finally I just called the doctor back and I said, I would like a referral to a neurologist and have Al tested. And he wasn't real happy with that, but I was very pleased that he did give it to me anyway, and we were able to go on and get a formal diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That's great, Barbara. Being your loved one's advocate is so challenging and so tiring, but you have to be that voice of reason.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Trying to keep mom's dignity as long as possible, but fearing she may lose her wedding ring. How do I keep safe her ring and still make her feel that she still has the ring? She likes to spin it.
Well, you might, I don't know, it might work if you took it off her finger and put it on a chain around her neck. Maybe she would not be so inclined to keep spinning it. Or do that and then maybe buy her a cheap ring that she could put on her finger and spin it, and if she lost it, it wouldn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not an expert in jewelry per se, but I mean, certainly as family members I know will sometimes swap out an expensive diamond or stone for not a real diamond, or substitute something. People with dementia do lose things. They throw things away. They give things away. Generally, be aware that if you have staff coming in or assisted living, it's rare that people ever steal things, but I think it's still prudent to maybe swap it for a different ring. It's very tough. These are tough decisions to make, but I do think I'll just compliment the person who asked the question. I really like the fact that you're being proactive and thinking about possibilities, because that will allow you to be proactive, not reactive.
That's a great point. Okay, and then we have 2 more questions. What do I do when I don't understand what my loved one is talking about? I can't understand his reasoning and don't know how to reply. And so I think, Barbara, you covered some of that, sort of redirect and...
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to let them know that you're there to help them, and be honest with them. Tell them, I'm so sorry, it's my fault, I can't quite understand what you're saying. Could we work on this a little bit more? But be calm and reassuring, and don't get upset or agitated. You're just going to agitate that person also.
That was great. Good. Yeah. Okay, good. And our last question is a perfect segue. It says, what is the best piece of literature that I can read to help caregivers understand Alzheimer's disease process? So we're a little bit biased here, but we think that David's book is a great resource for families. So we have chosen 3 winners to receive his Best Friends Approach book. Pat Breeder, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your last name, Vicki Lamb, and John Thompson. So we will reach out to them via email and make sure that they get the book. But thank you so much. Do you guys want to say a few closing words?
Well, again, just want to thank so many of my friends in Kentucky. I feel such a special place in my heart for my time that I spend in Lexington, Kentucky at the Sanders Brown Center on Aging, where I really learned so much about you, and this whole Best Friends approach was born. I want to thank my friends with the Alzheimer Association. About half my career has been with the Alzheimer Association, and what a vibrant, great group. And then finally, my friends at Trilogy, who do a wonderful job with their BFF memory care program. And I've been very honored that they've taken the work Virginia Bell and I have done and given it their own unique spin on it. We really do think that activities, engagement, socialization are in so many ways the treatment for dementia. I'm excited about the year ahead, Shannon. The Alzheimer Association has been incredible with their advocacy. They have so much new research funding out there. With money comes progress, and I'm hoping that we will see more medications approved and a greater understanding of dementia this year. Thanks again. Do you want to say something, Barbara? Go ahead. Or do you want to?
Well, all I want to say is, again, reiterate what David said. Thank you all for having us here today. Thank you to Trilogy and the Alzheimer's Association, also our crew that worked so diligently when we had a little bit of a problem with the technology, but you got us back working up good. So thank you all very much.
And I'm Taylor Adams. On behalf of Trilogy, we just like to say thank you to David and to Barbara and the Alzheimer's Association for being here and putting this on. We hope a lot of our residents and families are on there. And if not, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We would love to care for you guys, provide resources. And if you need anything, please reach out to us. And thank you all for joining us today.